The Nazis never suspected a watchmaker was hiding 800 Jews in a secret room. Corrie ten Boom, February 28, 1944, 12:30 p.m., Barteljorenstraat 19, Haarlem, Netherlands. Oberscharführer Karl Willemse climbed the narrow staircase of the Ten Boom watch shop, with 6 Gestapo agents trailing behind him. They had received a tip from a Dutch informant. This family of Christian watchmakers was hiding Jews. Willemse, a veteran of dozens of raids, smiled with easy confidence. These operations always ended the same way. Naive people, obvious hiding places, quick arrests. He stepped through the workshop crowded with antique clocks, his trained eyes scanning for telltale signs, false doors, loose panels, oddly shaped spaces. The house was old and tight, typically Dutch. Perfect for hiding spots, sure, but he had found hundreds. "Search every inch," he ordered in German. "There are Jews here. I can smell them." What Willemse didn't know, what no Nazi officer in the Netherlands had ever discovered, was that less than 2 meters from where he stood, behind a false wall in a second-floor bedroom, 6 people were holding their breath inside a space only 80 centimeters deep. An impossible room, invisible, engineered. And that secret room was only a small piece of a rescue network that, by February 1944, had already saved more than 800 Jews from the gas chambers. Run not by trained soldiers or intelligence agents, but by a single, unmarried 51-year-old watchmaker named Corrie ten Boom, who had never broken a law in her life until the Nazis gave her a reason to. Over the next 6 hours, the Gestapo would tear that house apart, searching for the hiding place they knew had to exist. They would pound on walls, measure rooms, interrogate the family. But they would never find the room. And in that failure, they would stumble into something Nazi arrogance had never considered possible. That a middle-aged Dutch woman, armed with nothing but faith, ingenuity, and a network of watchmakers and resistance fighters, had built the most effective rescue system in occupied Holland. This is the story of how a family of watchmakers precision-engineered the salvation of 800 souls. How an 80-centimeter secret room outwitted the full machinery of the Gestapo, and how quiet faith proved stronger than organized terror. The world before the occupation. The house at Barteljorenstraat 19 had been home to the ten Boom family for more than a century. Built in 1837, the narrow 3-story structure was classic Haarlem. A thin facade, steep stairs, small rooms stacked vertically. The ground floor housed Ten Boom and Sons, the watch shop founded in 1837 by Willem ten Boom, Corrie's great-grandfather. By 1940, the place was a charming anachronism. Casper ten Boom, 84 years old and the family patriarch, ran the shop with the same meticulous care as his father and grandfather before him. Every morning at 8 a.m., he opened the door. Every evening at 6 p.m., he locked up. The night watches he repaired ran with Swiss precision, even though they were Dutch work. Corrie, born April 15, 1892, was the youngest of 4 children. At 48 in 1940, she was an oddity, an unmarried woman in a society that assumed every woman would marry. But Corrie had found her calling not in marriage, but in watchmaking. In 1922, she became the first licensed female watchmaker in the Netherlands, an achievement the local newspapers treated more as a curiosity than progress. Her sister Betsy, 10 years older, had never married either. Together they managed the household. Betsy cooked, cleaned, organized. Corrie worked in the workshop, repairing mechanisms so tiny they demanded a magnifying glass and hands that never trembled. Their brother Willem was a pastor in Hilversum. Their sister Nolly lived in Haarlem with her family. The Ten Boom family was deeply religious. Dutch Reformed Calvinists who read the Bible every morning after breakfast and every night before sleep. But their faith wasn't abstract. It was practical, active. Casper Ten Boom had organized prayer groups for the Jewish people since the 1920s, decades before Hitler came to power. The family took Genesis 12:3 literally. "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse." What seemed quaint in the 1930s would become revolutionary in the 1940s. On May 10, 1940, German forces invaded the Netherlands without declaring war. The Wehrmacht crossed the border at 3:55 a.m. By noon, German paratroopers controlled key airfields. By 6 p.m., Rotterdam was under bombardment. On May 14th, after the Luftwaffe destroyed Rotterdam's city center and killed 900 civilians, the Netherlands surrendered. At first, the occupation was deceptively smooth. The Germans presented themselves as liberators, protecting Aryan Dutch citizens from the chaos of war. Shops stayed open. Life continued with an eerie sense of normality. The Nazis implemented control gradually, like water heating to a boil 1 degree at a time. In the Ten Boom shop, Casper kept repairing watches. Corrie kept serving customers. But both noticed subtle changes. Jewish customers began coming in with nervous questions. "Have you heard anything? Should we be worried?" Casper, whose memory stretched back to before World War I, answered with biblical calm, "Whoever touches Israel touches the apple of God's eye. Don't be afraid." Corrie, more practical, saw the warning signs. Decrees requiring Jews to register, mandatory yellow stars, restrictions on movement. Each decree was reasonable by Nazi logic. Together, they built a prison. The first refugees, May 1942. 2 years after the invasion, anti-Jewish measures accelerated. Jews were banned from parks, theaters, cinemas. They couldn't use public transport. They couldn't shop in Aryan stores. They had to be home by 8 p.m. One afternoon in May, while Corrie worked on a German pocket watch, an irony she didn't miss, the workshop door opened. A Jewish woman Corrie vaguely knew, the wife of a local tailor, stepped in without a yellow star. She spoke in urgent whispers. "Miss Ten Boom, they say your family helps people. My husband was arrested this morning. They're going to deport me. I have nowhere to go. Can you help me?" Corrie, who had never broken a law in her 50 years, who paid taxes down to the last cent, who returned library books a day early, looked at this terrified woman. Her father's answer was instant. "In this house," he said, "any child of God is welcome." That night, the woman slept in Corrie's room. The next morning, Corrie contacted someone she knew in the local resistance. By noon, the woman had been moved to a farmhouse in the countryside where she could hide more safely. Corrie thought it would be a one-time incident. She was completely wrong. In June, someone else knocked. Then another, then 2 more. The informal Dutch resistance network had identified the Ten Boom family as reliable. Word spread through Jewish circles. The watchmaker's house is safe. The problem was logistics. The Ten Boom home stood right in the middle of Haarlem on a busy street, directly across from a cafe frequented by Dutch collaborators and off-duty German officers. It wasn't a remote farm where people could hide indefinitely. It was a visibility trap. Corrie understood quickly. They couldn't keep people hidden there long-term. They had to become a transit station, moving refugees quickly to safer, permanent locations. But even transit required infrastructure. Safe addresses, forged documents, ration coupons, money. Corrie, who before the war had never lied, began building a criminal network according to Nazi law. Her first key contact was Fred Kornstra, a resistance man who worked in city administration. Fred had access to official stamps, document paper, identity records. He could create false identities that passed Nazi inspection. "How many do you need?" Fred asked. "I don't know," Corrie admitted. 10. "I'll make 100, Fred said. "You'll need them." He was absolutely right. Building the hiding place. By July 1942, the 10-boom house was regularly sheltering between 4 and 7 refugees at a time. Some stayed one night, others stayed a week, waiting for transport to permanent hiding places. The arrangement was fragile, dependent on neighbors not asking questions, customers not noticing, Nazis not suspecting. Corrie knew it couldn't last. They needed something more, an emergency hiding place, somewhere refugees could vanish completely if the Gestapo raided the house. In October 1942, through resistance contacts, Corrie was introduced to a man known only as the Architect. His real name was Herman Smit, a member of the Haarlem resistance who specialized in building hiding places. Smit had designed dozens across the Netherlands. Smit visited Barteljorisstraat 19 disguised as a termite inspector. He spent 4 hours measuring, tapping walls, studying the 105-year-old structure. When he finished, he called Corrie into the second-floor bedroom she shared with Betsy. "Here," he said, tapping the outer wall. "We'll build the hiding place here." Corrie stared, confused. The wall was exterior. It faced the street. "Shouldn't it be in the center of the house?" "Exactly why it has to be here," Smit said. "The Gestapo assumes hiding places are in the middle, cellars, attics. They never search outer walls. They think it's impossible to build something there without it showing from outside." Corrie's bedroom measured roughly 3 by 4 meters. Smit proposed building a false wall 80 centimeters in front of the exterior wall, creating an ultra-narrow space between the original wall and the new one. 80 centimeters doesn't sound like much," Corrie said. "It isn't," Smit admitted. "But it's enough for people to stand or sit. And it's the most we can take without the room looking obviously wrong." The technical specifications showed Smit's brilliance. Dimensions: 2.5 meters high, 2 meters wide, 80 centimeters deep. Total volume: 4 cubic meters. Entrance: a sliding panel hidden at the back of a built-in wardrobe. To enter, you moved shoes, opened the panel, crawled through a 60-centimeter opening, then closed it from inside. Capacity: 6 to 8 people standing or sitting. Lying down was impossible. Ventilation: passive airflow through microscopic gaps in the house's original construction. Uncomfortable, but enough to survive 2 to 3 hours. Construction: reclaimed old brick that matched the house's 1837 brick exactly. Mortar artificially aged. Plaster applied to match the wear on the other walls. Camouflage details: pictures hung on the new wall positioned to match nail marks elsewhere. Artificial dust buildup. A deliberate crack in the plaster to mimic the house's existing cracks. Construction took 3 nights, done after curfew, so no one would question building noises. The workers were resistance members, many of them professional builders. They removed rubble in small bags, scattering it across legitimate construction sites in Haarlem. Every detail was planned to leave no trace. When they finished, Smit invited Corrie to inspect. She walked into her bedroom and literally could not see any difference. The room looked the same, only slightly smaller. The missing 80 centimeters was so subtle that even knowing it was there, her eyes didn't register it as wrong. "Measure the room from outside," Smit suggested. Corrie stepped out onto Barteljorisstraat, looked up at her second-floor window, and tried to calculate the interior dimensions from the street. Impossible. The proportions looked perfectly normal. Now the real test, Smith said. He called in the 6 construction workers. Hide in the space, try to make noise. 6 men, all bigger than Corrie, squeezed into the 4 cubic meters. The panels slid shut. Smith and Corrie stepped out of the bedroom, closed the door, and waited in the hall. Total silence. Smith struck the bedroom walls with a mallet, listening for hollowness. Everything sounded solid. He measured the room with a tape measure and compared it to municipal records he had falsified to match the new dimensions. If the Gestapo shows up with original 1837 blueprints, we're exposed, he said. But those plans were destroyed in a fire in 1890. The municipal records now match these dimensions. The hiding place cost 800 Dutch guilders, about $450 in 1942 dollars, paid for by resistance donations. Every guilder represented risk. Every donor represented someone who could be arrested. The first real test came a week later. The alarm system. A hiding place was useless without time to reach it. The 10-boom house needed an early warning system that could buy refugees the critical seconds needed to disappear. Rolf van Vliet, electrical engineer in the resistance, designed the system. It was brutally simple, which meant it was reliable. He installed alarm buttons in multiple locations. One in the watch workshop, within reach of Corrie or Casper. One in the living room where Betsy spent most of her time. One in the kitchen. One hidden under the counter near the entrance. The buttons were wired through hidden cables to electric buzzers in every room, but especially loud in Corrie's bedroom, where the hiding place was located. If anyone pressed a button, if Gestapo agents were seen approaching, if suspicious customers asked strange questions, if anything felt off, the buzzer sounded. Refugees were given simple instructions. When you hear the buzzer, drop everything. Books, food, blankets, papers. Leave half-drunk glasses of water. Leave shoes on the floor. Run upstairs to Corrie's room, to the wardrobe, through the panel, into the hiding place. Slide the panel closed. Absolute silence. Corrie calculated that the process, from buzzer to total silence, had to take under 70 seconds for 6 people. It was a terrifyingly tight margin. The Gestapo usually pounded on the door, waited 15 to 20 seconds, then kicked it in. That gave maybe 90 seconds total. The 10 booms ran drills. At first, they were disasters. Refugees panicked, stumbled on the stairs, fought the panel, got stuck in the narrow opening. Early attempts took 3 to 4 minutes, fatally slow. But people learned fast. Life or death accelerates learning. They memorized every step. They practiced opening the panel in total darkness. They learned how to breathe calmly in the cramped space to avoid hyperventilating. After 2 weeks, they'd cut the time to 65 seconds, then 58. The best recorded time, 54 seconds. Buzzer to total silence, 6 people hidden. Still, Corrie knew drills weren't the same as real terror. In training, everyone knew it was practice. In a real raid, fear would multiply every second. The first real raid came in December 1942. The first real raid, December 3rd, 1942, 2:15 p.m. Corrie was downstairs adjusting a watch escapement when she saw through the window 2 men in black leather coats, the unofficial Gestapo uniform, walking toward the door. Her hand slammed the alarm button. The buzzer blasted through the house. Upstairs, 4 refugees, 3 Jews, and a Dutch resistance man wanted by the Gestapo, abandoned their lunch. Bowls of soup sat untouched. A book lay open. A blanket was still warm. Corrie counted in her head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The men reached the door. One pounded hard, authoritative. 10 Mississippi, 11 Mississippi, 12 Mississippi. Casper, moving with the deliberate pace of an 86-year-old, walked slowly to the door. Every second he gained was precious. 20 Mississippi, 21 Mississippi, 22 Mississippi. They knocked again. Open up! Police! 40 Mississippi, 41 Mississippi. Corrie could hear feet running upstairs. Too loud? Would the agents hear? 50 Mississippi, 51 Mississippi. Casper opened the door. Good day, gentlemen. How may I help you? He spoke Dutch deliberately slowly, with the accent of an old man. The agents pushed inside without invitation. We are the political police, the leader announced in German. We have received reports of illegal activities at this address. Corrie translated for Casper, who pretended not to understand German, even though he spoke it perfectly. Each translation bought seconds. 60 Mississippi, 1 minute. What kind of activities? Casper asked with genuine confusion. You are hiding Jews, the agent said flatly. We are going to search this house. Gentlemen, we are a Christian family. We help anyone in need, but we do not break the law. Technically true. By God's law, they broke nothing. By Nazi law, they broke everything. The agents split up. One began searching, downstairs, opening cupboards, moving furniture. The other climbed the stairs to the second floor. Corrie felt her heart freeze. 65 seconds had passed. Enough? The agent entered Corrie's bedroom. Corrie followed, trying to look cooperative but anxious, the behavior occupiers expected. He opened the wardrobe. He saw the neatly lined shoes. He shifted a few, searching for trapdoors. His hand brushed the area where the sliding panel was, but the panel was flawless. It looked like solid wall. He tapped the walls. Solid. The plaster deadened any difference in sound. He scanned the room's proportions with his eyes. Everything seemed normal. Behind the wall, 80 centimeters away, 4 people held their breath. A 62-year-old Jewish woman with a heart arrhythmia felt her pulse pounding. A 19-year-old resistance boy clenched his hands to keep from trembling loudly. A 45-year-old Jewish tailor silently prayed the Shema. A 16-year-old Jewish girl squeezed her eyes shut so hard she saw stars. The agent spent 10 minutes in the room. He searched under the bed, inside the wardrobe, behind furniture. He never found the hiding place. After 40 minutes, both agents regrouped downstairs. The house is clean, one said. False alarm. They left without apology. When the door finally shut, Corrie waited 5 full minutes, an eternity, before going upstairs and tapping the panel with the agreed code. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. The panel slid open. 4 pale faces, drenched in sweat, eyes wild with contained fear, emerged from the hiding place. The 62-year-old woman collapsed instantly, hyperventilating. Betsy laid her on the bed, gave her water, soothed her. The system had worked. 65 seconds had been enough, barely. That night, as Corrie lay in her bed inches from the hiding place that had saved 4 lives, she did the math of survival. 1 minute, 60 seconds. The difference between life and death. They needed to be faster. The network. Sarah expands. By early 1943, the 10-boom rescue operation had evolved from a family effort into an organized network. What started as a watchmaker improvising had become a system with industrial capacity. Corrie, who had never managed anything more complex than a pocket watch, was now coordinating an operation involving 80 safe addresses across the Netherlands where refugees could be hidden permanently. Mostly farms, but also convents, businesses, and wealthy families with large houses. 12 relay stations where refugees waited for transport. The 10 Boom House was the main station in Haarlem. Forgers producing ID cards, ration coupons, travel passes, birth certificates. Any paper required to survive in occupied Holland. Couriers collecting donations from sympathetic Dutch Christians. The operation cost roughly 1,000 guilders a week, the equivalent of around $15,000 today. Guides moving refugees between locations, mostly young Dutch men and women whose Aryan appearance and native Dutch helped them avoid suspicion. Informants inside Dutch police, city administration, and even some low-level Nazi offices, warning about planned raids, compromised documents, dangerous collaborators. At the center of the network was a small third-floor room at Barteljorisstraat 19, where Corrie kept meticulous coded records. Names were replaced with numbers. Addresses became invented grid coordinates. Dates were shifted by mathematical formulas. If the Gestapo ever seized those records, they would be useless without the cipher key Corrie kept in her head and never wrote down. The scale would have stunned Nazi officers if they'd understood it. By mid-1943, the 10 Boom network was moving 10 to 15 refugees a week. Each refugee meant a life saved, a family not shattered, a soul not delivered to Auschwitz. Refugees arrived through different routes. Some were referred by rabbis who knew the family's reputation. Others came desperate, knocking on doors at random, praying they had found the right one. Some were sent by other resistance cells when their own resources ran out. Corrie developed a screening protocol. When new refugees arrived, she asked innocent-sounding questions meant to expose Nazi infiltrators. Where did you worship in Amsterdam? Real Jews could name specific synagogues. What did you eat on Shabbat? Family traditions were hard to fake. Do you have family we can contact? Infiltrators often claimed entire families were destroyed, avoiding verification. It wasn't perfect. The margin for error meant she sometimes turned away genuine people or accepted someone risky. But Corrie trusted the instincts she developed after helping hundreds. Something in the eyes, the posture, the difference between real fear and performed fear. In 18 months of operation, she never accepted a Nazi infiltrator. Part skill, part luck, and, by her own understanding, completely miraculous. Life inside the hiding place people who passed through Barteljorisstraat 19 experienced a kind of terror war survivors describe as uniquely brutal. It wasn't battlefield terror, where death comes fast. It was the terror of forced invisibility, where every breath could betray you, where survival depended on becoming nothing. The 80-centimeter hiding place, designed for emergencies lasting 2 to 3 hours, sometimes held people for full days when repeated raids made it too dangerous to come out. Conditions were vicious. Space. With 6 people inside, each person had roughly 0.7 square meters. Lying down was impossible. Sitting without touching others was difficult. Standing for hours made legs swell painfully. Air, passive ventilation was enough to keep them alive, but not comfortable. Carbon dioxide built up, causing headaches, nausea, disorientation. After 4 or 5 hours, the air felt thick, hard to breathe. Temperature. In summer, the windowless space became an oven, over 35 degrees Celsius. In winter, without heat, it dropped near freezing. People shivered violently, but could not make a sound. Sanitation. No toilet. For short stays, people simply held it. For longer stays, Corrie discreetly placed a tin can. The smell in the sealed space was awful. Light, absolute darkness. No windows, no lamp. Disorientation hit immediately. People lost track of time, unable to tell if they'd been hidden for an hour or 5. Sound. Silence was mandatory. No talking, no shifting, no coughing, no sneezing. Refugees developed methods to suppress involuntary reactions. One woman who needed to sneeze pinched her nose so hard she bled rather than risk the sound. Meyer Mossel, a 52-year-old Jewish jeweler who spent 3 consecutive days in the hiding place during repeated raids in January 1944, later described it like this. It wasn't living. It was suspension between life and death. Every muscle ached. The air burned your lungs. The silence was so complete, I could hear my blood moving. After 12 hours, you start hallucinating. You see lights that aren't there. You hear voices. Your mind cracks under the strain. But what really breaks you isn't the physical pain. It's knowing that centimeters away, Nazis are tearing the house apart, looking for you. You can hear them talking, laughing. Once I heard an officer comment on how comfortable Corrie's bedroom was. He was literally touching the wall I was standing behind. The human body can endure surprising pain. The mind can endure surprising terror. But that combination, physical suffering plus absolute fear plus forced silence, that shows you something about human limits. You survive by discovering the limits are more flexible than you believed. Yusi, a 17-year-old girl who went into the hiding place 5 different times, developed a psychological technique she taught others. I imagined I was water. Water has no shape. It adapts to the container. It doesn't resist. It flows. When the space felt too small, I thought, I am water. I fill this space perfectly. When the air felt too heavy, I thought, I am water. I don't need air the same way. When fear became overwhelming, I thought, I am water. Fear flows through me, but it doesn't change me. It sounds stupid. It was probably oxygen deprivation delirium, but it worked. You separated from your body. Your body was in that terrible space, but your mind was somewhere else. That's how you survived. Not everyone survived psychologically. A 60-year-old man developed such severe claustrophobia after a 6-hour stay that he preferred risking deportation to entering again. Corrie moved him to a farmhouse location where space wasn't an issue. A 34-year-old woman became mute after an 8-hour stay. She didn't speak for 2 weeks after being transported to a permanent safe address. Resistance doctors diagnosed traumatic shock. She eventually regained her speech, but never recovered any memory of those 8 hours. Her mind erased them as self-defense. Children were especially vulnerable. Mary, 8 years old, developed a coping mechanism that worried Corrie. She dissociated so completely that she emerged with no memory of ever being inside. Her mind simply skipped that time, creating protective amnesia. Most refugees, though, adapted. Humans are astonishingly adaptable when the alternative is death. They developed mental rituals, breathing techniques, silent meditations. They became experts at absolute stillness, living statues. And when they emerged, panel opening, light flooding in, fresh air rushing into their lungs, the relief felt almost spiritual. Several refugees described crying uncontrollably, not from sadness, but from pure physical release. Corrie watched this trauma again and again, and it devastated her every time. These were not people trained for deprivation. Shopkeepers, teachers, doctors, parents. War had turned them into terrified creatures hiding inside walls. But she also watched them reclaim their humanity when danger passed. They would crawl out trembling, crying, and then slowly return to themselves. They ate, they spoke. Some even laughed. Their resilience never stopped astonishing her. What Corrie didn't know was that soon she would experience that hiding place from the inside. The betrayal. Jan Vogel was a 22-year-old Dutchman, unemployed, opportunistic, morally flexible in exactly the way Nazi occupation rewarded. In 1943, he became a Gestapo informant, reporting resistance activity in exchange for money and favors. By February 1944, Vogel had heard rumors about a watchmaker family in Haarlem helping Jews. The rumors didn't name a specific address, but they named the street, Barteljorisstraat. Vogel devised a clever plan. He would present himself as a Jew seeking help, identify the operation, then report it to his Gestapo contacts. Premeditated betrayal, calculated for profit. The Gestapo paid 7.50 guilders per Jew reported, plus bonuses for dismantling resistance networks. On February 28, 1944, Vogel knocked on the door of Barteljorisstraat 19. Corrie answered. "I need help," Vogel said. "I'm Jewish. My wife was arrested. They're looking for me. I heard this house." Corrie, normally cautious, noticed something off. The man's eyes were too calm. His story was too generic. But she was sick with influenza, burning with a 39 degrees Celsius fever, her judgment compromised. "Where do you normally live?" she asked. "Amsterdam," Vogel answered too quickly. "Which synagogue?" "The big one, the main one." "Vague." "Wait here," Corrie said, not inviting him inside. She closed the door, intending to verify his story through her Amsterdam contacts. But before she could make the call, her fever spiked. She collapsed into bed, delirious. Betsy, worried about her sister, didn't follow protocol. She let Vogel in briefly to give him an alternative address where he might find help. It was a compassionate mistake. And it was fatal. Vogel memorized everything. The watch shop, the layout of the house, the names of family members he saw, and the clear signs of hidden people, extra clothing, extra dishes. That afternoon, Vogel reported to the Gestapo. Lieutenant Willemse, in charge of anti-resistance operations in Haarlem, ordered an immediate raid. February 28, 1944. The raid 12:30 p.m. Corrie was still in bed, feverish. Inside the house were 6 refugees, 4 Jews, 2 women, 2 men, and 2 Dutch resistance members wanted by the Gestapo. The alarm buzzer exploded. Corrie, disoriented by fever, didn't understand at first. Then adrenaline hit her. Raid. Downstairs, Casper had seen Gestapo cars pull up outside. 3 vehicles, 8 officers. Much larger than anything before. The 6 refugees moved. They had practiced dozens of times. They dropped everything, open books, coffee still warm, blankets on the sofa, and ran upstairs as the Nazis pounded the door. 52 seconds. Everyone inside. Panel shut. The Gestapo kicked in the door and stormed in shouting in German and Dutch. "No one move. This house is under arrest." Oberscharführer Willemse went straight upstairs to Corrie's bedroom. He found Corrie in bed, visibly ill, sweating with fever. "We know you're hiding Jews," he said. "Tell me where they are, and there will be mercy. Resist, and everyone dies." Corrie, weak but clear, answered, "There is no one here except my family." Willemse began the most methodical search the Nazis had ever conducted in that house. This wasn't a routine raid. It was a planned operation based on specific intelligence. They brought tools, mallets, probes, measuring instruments. They struck walls systematically, listening for hollow echoes. They measured rooms, comparing them to external dimensions. For 6 hours they searched, wrecking the house. They tore down panels, pried up floorboards, emptied wardrobes completely. Inside the hiding place, 6 people remained, absolutely motionless. They could hear everything: mallets hitting walls, Nazi officers shouting, furniture being smashed. The 62-year-old woman with arrhythmia felt her heart stuttering. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to quiet what felt like audible pounding. The 19-year-old bit his shirt so he wouldn't gasp for air. The 16-year-old silently prayed, tears streaming down her face that she couldn't wipe without moving. Willemse returned to Corrie's bedroom again and again. He hammered the walls. The false walls sounded solid. The plaster perfectly absorbed any difference in resonance. He measured the room, 3 meters by 3.2 meters. The falsified municipal documents showed identical dimensions. He looked out the window, mentally calculating the external size. It matched. At 6:30 p.m., after 6 hours, Willemse admitted defeat. "I know they're here," he shouted into the air. "We will find your hiding place. It's only a matter of time." But he had failed. He arrested the entire Ten Boom family: Casper, Corrie, Betsy, Willem, who happened to be visiting that day, along with 30 other people found in the house, including watch shop customers and resistance workers. What Willemse didn't know was that he had left 6 people behind the wall. No food, no fresh water beyond emergency bottles, no way to get out without help from outside. The rescue. The 6 people in the hiding place waited in darkness and silence until after midnight before daring to whisper. "Are they gone?" Someone breathed, barely audible. "I think so," another answered. They tried to open the panel from inside. They couldn't. The mechanism required pressure from the outside. They were trapped. They had small amounts of water. Corrie always kept bottles in the hiding place for emergencies. But no food, no way to contact anyone. Meyer Mossel, the 52-year-old jeweler, took charge. "We conserve energy, minimal movement, ration water, someone will come. And if no one comes," the 16-year-old whispered. "They will," Mossel insisted with confidence he didn't feel. Outside, the resistance had noticed the arrests. The raid couldn't be hidden. 30 people taken, Gestapo cars out front for hours. Neighbors had seen everything. But the resistance didn't know whether the hiding place had been discovered. They didn't know if people were trapped inside or if everyone had been captured. Rolf van Vliet, the electrical engineer, made the decision. "We have to check. If people are in there, they'll die of dehydration in days." It was extraordinarily risky. The Gestapo often left watchers after large raids, hoping accomplices would return. Approaching the house could mean instant arrest. At 2 a.m. on March 1st, about 47 hours after the raid, Van Vliet approached Barteljorisstraat 19. He watched for 30 minutes. No guards. The Nazis, stretched thin, had left no surveillance. He picked the back door lock and slipped inside. The house was wrecked, furniture overturned, walls damaged, papers everywhere. He climbed to the 2nd floor. "Is anyone there?" he whispered, using the code refugees were taught. From behind the wall, "Yes, 6 people. We can't get out." Van Vliet opened the panel. 6 people crawled out, dehydrated, traumatized, but alive. They had been sealed inside for 47 hours. He evacuated them immediately to safe addresses. By 4 a.m., they were hidden across Haarlem. The Gestapo never realized they had been centimeters away from capturing 6 people during a 6-hour search. All 6 survived the war. Each later testified that those 47 hours inside the 80-centimeter hiding place were the most terrifying experience of their lives, worse even than the years that followed in rural hiding. Aftermath: Casper ten Boom, 84, died in Scheveningen prison 10 days after the arrest. His already fragile health collapsed under Nazi conditions. He died on March 9, 1944. His last words, according to prisoners who heard him, were, "It would be an honor to give my life for God's people." Corrie and Betsy were sent to concentration camps. First Voet in the Netherlands, then Ravensbrück in Germany. Betsy died in Ravensbrück on December 16, 1944, just days before the camp was liberated. Corrie survived because of a clerical error. She was released on December 28, 1944, 1 week before all women her age were executed. An administrative mistake saved her life. After the war, Corrie devoted herself to speaking about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the Holocaust. In 1971, she published The Hiding Place, which sold millions of copies and was adapted into a film in 1975. She lived until 1983, dying at 91 after sharing her story in more than 60 countries. Post-war records compiled by Dutch historians and NIOD, the Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies, estimate that the Ten Boom network saved roughly 800 Jewish lives during the Nazi occupation. The exact number can't be known. Many records were destroyed, and many survivors never learned the names of the people who saved them. But 800 is the conservative estimate based on existing documentation and survivor testimony. In 1967, Corrie was honored by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations, Israel's recognition for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. Jan Vogel, the betrayer, was arrested after the war, tried for collaboration, and executed in 1945. The house at Barteljorisstraat 19 is now the Corrie ten Boom Museum. The hiding place remains exactly as it was built in 1942. Visitors can step into the 80-centimeter space, feel the claustrophobia, and imagine 47 hours inside. It is deeply unsettling. The space that saved dozens of lives feels like a tomb. Analysis: why it worked. The Ten Boom rescue operation succeeded where thousands of similar efforts failed for several reasons. Superior engineering. Herman Smith's hiding place was technically better than almost anything else built in occupied Holland. Most hiding places were obvious improvisations, attics, basements, underfloors. The Gestapo found them within minutes. The Ten Boom hiding place violated Nazi assumptions about where to look. Outer walls were believed impossible to alter without visible, external evidence. Smith proved otherwise. Obsessive practice, constant drills meant refugees could reach the hiding place in under 60 seconds, even under panic. Most rescue operations didn't practice, leading to fatal mistakes during real raids. Central location, paradoxically, being in the middle of Haarlem was an advantage. The Gestapo assumed resistance work happened in remote areas, not across from cafes used by Nazis. The watch shop cover, a legitimate business, created constant foot traffic. Customers came and went all day, making it nearly impossible for observers to distinguish real customers from refugees. Harmless appearance, Corrie was an unmarried, middle-aged, religious woman with no political activist past. Nazis consistently underestimated women, especially older women. The network exploited that bias brilliantly. Decentralized structure. There was no single point of failure. If one node was compromised, others continued. When the 10 Booms were arrested, the network kept operating under different leaders. Genuine religious motivation. They weren't driven by politics or profit. They were driven by deep faith that viewed helping Jews as a literal divine command. That sincerity made it hard for Nazi interrogators to break them. The legacy Corrie ten Boom story and that 80-centimeter hiding place represents something deeper than a successful rescue operation. It represents ordinary people resisting extraordinary evil. The Nazis built an industrial system of death backed by the full machinery of the modern state. Trains, bureaucracy, factories, technology. Against that, people like the Ten Booms had only their hands, their ingenuity, and their faith. That 800 lives could be saved by a family of watchmakers working out of a narrow house on a Dutch street proves that totalitarianism, no matter how powerful, has weaknesses determined people can exploit. The hiding place was tiny, 4 cubic meters of space that felt like a grave. But that small space defeated the Third Reich more effectively than many military operations ever did, because every life saved was a victory the Nazis could never undo. Hermann Göring, Hitler's deputy, famously said, "When I hear the word culture, I reach for my revolver." Corrie ten Boom, a 50-year-old watchmaker, replied, by the way she lived, "When I hear people need help, I open my door." In the end, the door beat the revolver. Not because it was stronger, but because it was more persistent. Epilogue. The final encounter. In 1947, 3 years after her release from Ravensbrück, Corrie ten Boom was speaking in a church in Munich about forgiveness. After her talk, a man approached her. She recognized him instantly, one of the cruelest guards at Ravensbrück, the same man present when Betsy died. "Fräulein," he said in German, "what a wonderful message about God's forgiveness. I too was a guard at Ravensbrück. But I have become a Christian. I know God has forgiven me for the terrible things I did there. But I would like to hear it from you. Will you forgive me?" He held out his hand. Corrie froze. She could preach forgiveness, but practice it? This man represented everything that had destroyed her family, killed her sister, and broken her life. For 5 long seconds, she later wrote, which seemed like hours, I wrestled with the hardest thing I had ever had to do. Finally, mechanically, she extended her hand and took his. The moment I did, she wrote, something incredible happened. A current began in my shoulder, ran down my arm, and sprang into our joined hands. Then this healing warmth seemed to flood my whole being, bringing tears to my eyes. I forgive you, brother, I cried. With all my heart, I forgive you. The lesson of the 80-centimeter hiding place wasn't only about physical survival. It was about preserving humanity in conditions designed to destroy it. The Nazis tried to reduce people to numbers, objects, less than nothing. Yet inside that impossibly small space, where 6 people stood pressed together, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to exist visibly, humanity endured. Because even when their bodies were trapped, their minds remained free. And that freedom, the preserved humanity, made possible something even more miraculous than survival. It made forgiveness possible. The hiding place saved bodies. The faith that built it saved souls. The Nazis never suspected that a watchmaker was hiding 800 Jews in a secret room, because they fundamentally underestimated what ordinary human beings can do when they choose to resist. Willemse, the Gestapo officer, spent 6 hours searching for a hiding place inches from his reach and never found it. He died in 1945 without knowing how close he'd been. Hermann Schmidt, the architect who built the hiding place, survived the war and later designed Holocaust memorials, turning his construction genius toward preserving memory instead of preserving lives. The hiding place remains. Barthel-Joris-straat 19 is open to visitors. You can step into the 80-centimeter space, Feel the walls closing in. Imagine 47 hours and try to understand. But you will never fully understand. Because what happened in that space goes beyond physical comprehension. It was spiritual mathematics. How zero space contained infinite courage. How absolute silence screamed resistance. How 80 centimeters defeated an empire. The last word belongs to Corrie, written in her diary in 1974, 3 years before she died. People ask how we could do what we did, how we could risk everything for strangers. The answer is simple. They were not strangers. They were people created in the image of God. And when you see God in every face, there are no questions about helping. There is only obedience. The 80-centimeter hiding place stands as a silent testimony to what happens when ordinary people decide that faith requires action, love requires risk, and humanity requires resistance. The Nazis built Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, industrial machines of death that murdered millions. Against that, Corrie ten Boom built an 80-centimeter hiding place that saved 800. An impossibly small space, an impossibly large victory. They never suspected it. They never understood it. They never found it. And that is why they lost.